Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Snowflake user group. We're very excited today to be joined by Nitt from Shippit, who is going to take us through his journey with Snowflake so far. Please, if you have any questions for Nitt or Snowflake and myself, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the session. But I know Nitt's got an action-packed presentation he's going to take you through, introducing himself and the team and the journey he's gone through with Snowflake. So I'm going to pass it over to him. As I said, questions in the chat box and we'll get to them later. All right, Nitt, over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Nitt Chuenprateep, and I am the Business Systems and Data Manager over at Shippit, which is an amazing company that's really changing the face of logistics within Australia and Southeast Asia, but more on that a little later. What we're talking about right now is really going to be how we brought Snowflake on board and how we really transitioned to a modern data stack, right? And also some of the tricks and tips and tricks that we learned along the way. And also some of the things that I wish I had done a little bit differently in my adoption of Snowflake and Shippit's adoption of Snowflake in general. Cool? So a little bit about myself to begin. And then also we're going to talk about how we're getting Snowflake aboard and the things that we actually did and how we actually had to structure our arguments in order to make sure that we could get Snowflake aboard and how we could ensure that we could get the proper investments behind it, because there are lots of investments that go into the so-called modern data stack. And it's not just the initial hit that you have to do, but you also have to keep proving the value of it as time goes on, which should be obvious, but there's a few little things that we learned how to put together to really drive that home for people, right? Then I'm going to talk about what I feel the real value of Snowflake was for us, which was utilizing it in our ecosystem, right? Which in terms of the ecosystem that we have a lot of different business systems. We've got over 70 different couriers that feed data into Snowflake. We've got a whole variety of different ways that that we could use the data. So I'll go over a few of those. Then I'll go over those lessons I spoke about and also a few ways that, we're hoping to extend the stack in the future and also possibly get you involved, right? So if I move on to the next slide, I'm Nitt. Great to meet all of you. I started at Shippit in 2019, December of 2019. So right at the start of the bushfires prior to COVID as the first data analytics hire at Shippit, right? And what's cool now is that, for I think the first entire year that me and Serena were talking about Snowflake and bringing to Shippit, I didn't really have a team to begin with, right? But now we've become a team of 4 and we're actually growing and hiring because our growth has just been exponential over the past while. What with the increases in online shopping and also some of the advancements that we've been able to make over the past year, right? Prior to working at Shippit, I actually worked in aviation safety for the US government. Actually responsible for data warehousing across the Federal Aviation Administration safety databases, and also heading up kind of a community of practice about analytics at the Federal Aviation Administration, right? But I felt it was time to do something new, right? Because I'd actually been working for the government for quite some time before I moved to Australia. And, I didn't want to be someone who just worked at the same place forever. It was time to try something new and live somewhere else, right? So here I am, right? And I actually have a background in mechanical engineering and design. So by design, I mean like graphic design, which is really funny and kind of random. I hope that means that my slides are a little more visually appealing than they would otherwise be. So, let me know afterwards. And a little thing about me, I absolutely love group fitness. I used to teach cardio kickboxing. It was ridiculous and hectic. But also on a normal day, I usually go to Barry's boot camp at least once or twice, which is a little obnoxious. So if any of you are ever interested in coming with me, you let me know. I'll bring you over. And I'm also going to introduce a bit of my team and sort of the way that we're kind of structured, right? So I oversee the business systems work and also the data and analytics, right? So accompanying me, I've got James Peterson, who's an amazing analytics lead, helping to really drive the direction of this program forward, right? And also I've got Tira Ranzola, who joins us from Deputy and is our new head of data platform working in the engineering side of things, right? So I've got the analytics side covered, and I've also got a really strong data engineer in Tira, right? Who's actually heading up the data engineering function. And on top of that, we also have a reporting analyst, Haishin, right? So between this, we've got covered the data engineering, the analytics engineering, and also the data analysis that has to come out of this, right? So this is kind of the beginning of that base layer of data analytics, sort of reporting and structures like that. Cool. So what is Shippit's mission and how do we actually fit into it, right? So what we're meant to do is we're actually meant to say, hey, guess what? Logistics is everywhere. You know, you ship a parcel from here to Kalgoorlie, from here to Singapore, you should be able to use Shippit, right? Especially if you're a business who's looking to scale, right? If you're trying to integrate one courier with your own platform, you know, that's a lot of work on your end, you know, and let's say that you're trying to integrate 3 different couriers and get the best pricing from each of those or different features. For example, you know, express, transit protection, etc. All of that stuff can be done through Shippit, right? So essentially we serve as a conduit to assist you in picking like the best couriers that are accessible, scalable, and cost effective, right? And also we have lots of enhancements on top of the standard delivery experience, right? We've got notifications that we send to you that say when your package is on the way or not. We're able to look, if you have 5 different couriers sending 5 different parcels to different states, we're able to compile all of those consignments and show you the statuses all at once, so you know exactly where everything is, right? And that way we're able to go ahead and create these experiences for our customers that, you know, make people want to shop with you again, right? And that's really the whole point, right? It's power e-commerce to really make it such that anyone can use any courier, and that it's a reliable process for you that, you know, actually makes your customers happy, right? Because, you know, a customer is usually quite happy if they get their parcel on time. If you allocate your parcel properly through Shippit or use our allocation engine to do so, and it gets there on time, hey, happy days, I'll shop with you again, yeah? Right? If a parcel gets damaged and you use our transit protection product, we can actually say, hey, we can reimburse you for the cost of that. Send another one out, you'll be all right, you know? So there's all sorts of different ways that we enhance the experience as well. So all this means that we do a lot of management of work and a lot of management of parcels and a lot of management of how things flow through a variety of courier systems, right? So it means that, you know, when I started at Shippit, I was up against this ridiculous morass, and I think that's a good word for it, morass of strangeness, where things would randomly time out. You know, I looked at queries that looked like they were written by a drunken fruit bat, because that's literally what I look at and I see there. Like the structure is a little awkward and strange, right? And also, if I look at the sidebar there, I've got so many dashboards called trial lists. I've got so many queries called trial lists, and there's no real source of truth as to what's going on, right? So the original implementation of Shippit's structure was basically querying a Postgres, because that's kind of what you do as a startup, right? You begin with, hey, let's see if this is going to be a going concern. Okay, it's a going concern. We're growing too quickly in order to really keep up with the old structure that we had, right? And that old structure is falling apart, where you get like SQL queries timing out, you get repeats of amazingly strange dashboards, and you also get drunken fruit bat SQL queries, you know, my favorite, because as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, everyone thinks they can write SQL. Are they right? Well, you can write it, but is it the way that you would write it? Not too sure, right? So therefore, I had to go ahead and build the case for saying, hey, guess what? Modern data stack, let's go. Let's try something new, right? Let's do something let's bring us into the new age, and let's give us the power we need to really power these delivery experiences and make them work for people, right? So looking at all of the different pain points that we had, right? It was really important for me to say, hey, as a business, let's go ahead and try to build the argument for each thing, right? So one of the things that I did when I came on board, like first day I was told was that I'd be actually helping to implement Salesforce, right? Which isn't like exactly the standard way a data and analytics engineer kind of interacts with everybody. Usually there's someone else to do that, but hey, it's a startup, you know, fast and loose. Get the data and analytics engineer onto Salesforce, why not, right? But what that did was actually give me the ability to say, hey, sales and marketing don't have access to, for example, the Zendesk tickets that for the accounts within the first 90 days, right? Which is really, really crucial when you're onboarding new customers. You don't want them to have poor experiences within the first 90 days, right? Because there wasn't really a way to get that connection built within the tools that we currently had, right? And also, for example, working for the logistics team, they needed to get information and combine information from app, information from the billing system, and information from Zendesk to say, yo, guess what? I need to be able to say, if this important enterprise customer has a bunch of tickets open, I need to be able to go in and immediately rebook all of these parcels for them and automatically get them rebooked, right? And so if we start simple with finding these like very simple pain points, working with each part of the business, right? And being able to say, hey, great, account management, I can do this for you. Finance, I can do this for you. Support, I can do this for you. But we all need to build kind of a groundswell for the case, right? That's kind of what you need to do, right? You also need to make sure that you educate people on the entire stack, right? I think towards the end, and you'll hear me say this again, I probably would have explained the entire stack to everybody about 4 times, right? Individually, right? But sometimes that's what you've got to do when you're trying to launch something new, because I can tell you that like for a lot of people, this is a newer concept, right? Being able to utilize Fivetran, Snowflake, dbt, and Looker in this way, along with all the other business systems that you may have, it's a new concept for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't really know what's possible, right? So the other thing that I did a lot of was just proving out use cases, right? Just building out specific use cases, for example, that Zendesk reporting for accounts, right? And showing people that, hey, with the, $400 of Snowflake credit that I have, or with the free version of dbt, and with this trial version of Looker, this is what I'm able to accomplish, right? Now, if you're able to take that and multiply it across, right? This iterative approach actually helped to really build that case for the investment that we needed. And without that iterative approach, like if I had waited for everything to be perfect, and I was waiting to like just build out all of the data warehouse to be exactly perfect the way that I needed it to be, I may not have had the investment that I would want, right? So that's kind of like one of the points I want to drive across, is like building the case for me was oftentimes about building out iterative use cases to say, hey, I've taken care of this problem. Imagine that multiplied by however many other problems you have, 99 of them. I'm not going to complete that sentence. Next. So another thing that helps to also build the value is something that James Peterson drew out for us, which is called the data value chain, right? And so the data value chain is essentially a way of saying, hey, guess what? If I've got a data engineer and an analytics engineer, what do they both do, right? Well, how are their roles distinct in the modern data stack, right? And the way that we're able to do that is kind of take it into the way that raw records currently get created, and how the analytics engineer then makes that data useful for analysis, right? What we had on the left-hand side was a situation where, let's say we didn't have anybody around to actually do that work, right? If you just had the army of one approach, right? What would occur is that when you try to build the automations, we started to show people that, hey, nothing useful could really occur because only limited transformations were possible because you didn't have the capacity to do these things, right? Whereas if you're able to kind of show people and how raw records work and how those raw records work in the system right now and the infrastructure thereof, right? And then you're able to say, hey, let's make that data useful for analysis so that it can be used by two different teams. For example, the analytics team and the reporting for self-service, right? Different use cases, you're able to create value from your data, right? So this sort of structure was also really helpful in explaining to people why the investment was necessary in various parts of business, right? And this is actually, I think, a really good schematic to use, especially as you move forward and try to gain investment for, for Snowflake, for Fivetran, for dbt, for whatever you may be coming across that you need, or even just people, You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of you are probably going to be in the same boat as me if you're a startup. You're trying to build out from that army of one. And I've heard it before where people are like, but you're managing to do it. Why should I hire more people if you're managing to do it by yourself, right? You kind of have to show people a better what is possible, as I always say. So what are the effects of us actually going to implement Snowflake, right? So if you go back to that first initial carrier reporting example that I showed you, it used to take a lot of manual querying and 8 hours to pull that report like every week by an analyst. And now it's automated and it's done in 5 minutes, right? Also, with business system data that we've got in Snowflake now, we can actually combine sources utilizing UUIDs, and so that you're able to get a bigger picture, a greater view of like what's going on with folk, right? And what's going on with your customers, which is really the most important thing here, right? And also, the other thing that I think we're really proud of here at Shippit is that there were 7 active users of the BI tool in December 2020, right? And we've actually grown that all the way out to 81 active users right now, which is kind of brilliant. And that to me, an active user is someone who logs in at least 3 times and spends at least 10 minutes on a session whenever they're in there and looks at least at least 2 different dashboards. Because yeah, I made my active user count pretty redonkulous there. But that's how you know it's being used properly, right? So some of the things that we've used Shippit to kind of help keep the investment working for us is the horizontal scaling that we've got, right? So if I look at the usage of reporting credits across February 2021, we had 20 active BI users, all the way to May 2021, where we've decided to horizontally scale across. And actually, if you think like, we've been able to actually improve the throughput of our users by utilizing horizontal scaling. And the reason for this is because we have a lot of users that literally will go in, and one of the first things that they'll do every morning is they'll go in and they'll open up like 40 different dashboards at once and just be like, click, 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 click. I love to open dashboards. I'm a logistics analyst at Shippit, and I love dashboards. I create all of my dashboards. They're beautiful and wonderful, right? But this creates kind of a backlog if you have just one cluster, even if that one cluster is an M cluster, right? So like James and Thierry had wonderful suggestions to utilizing horizontal scaling, which I absolutely love, because this allowed us to improve the throughput of our reporting warehouse, and while keeping the number of compute credits relatively constant in my book, right? Which is great because you quadrupled the number of users and you actually were able to kind of like keep the reporting credits pretty solid, you know? That's pretty good to me. The caveat here is that you've got to make sure that your transforms are actually used judiciously, you know, that, you know, you won't compete repeatedly like you're actually using the proper materializations, using incrementals when you should use incrementals, and not using incrementals when you shouldn't use incrementals, right? That sort of thing, because otherwise this will still balloon outwards, right? It's all about trying to ensure that, you know, you keep reporting constant without, for example, ballooning your transform cluster, for example, right? And horizontal scaling was actually a really good thing for us, because I come from a Redshift world. One of my previous things that I did that I had to deal with Redshift was actually scaling up and down things on a scripted basis, right? And this took me a lot of time. And while it was like weirdly, hilariously fun in a perverse way, I kind of enjoy the set and forget that I kind of have here, as long as I'm ensuring that, you know, I come back and check it every so often. And I've set alerts up as well so that I know how usage is going. The resource monitoring function is very, very helpful. And I highly advise that gets set up very, very quickly, almost as soon as you set up your clusters, because that will alert you to any spikes that occur. So you can kind of you can play around with making Snowflake more available using the horizontal scaling features, things like that. Great. Another thing that I've actually been experimenting with and have actually used pretty well is the RudderStack warehouse actions. Now, RudderStack is the open source alternative to Segment, or at least that's what they brand themselves as, right? But I've noticed it has a lot of other really interesting, really cool features, and you can easily play around with them and experiment with them as well. There's an open source, implementation of RudderStack available for you to experiment with, right? But something that I started to notice working at Shippit is that people people want to stay within the tools that they utilize, right? You've got salespeople who need to stay within Salesforce. You've got support users that want to stay within Zendesk. It's all about, to me, bringing data to where business users actually do their work. Because if people can't access the data, like, how are they supposed to make decisions based off of it, right? And having people switch windows, go to different places and do various different lookups, right? If you don't have that ability, if you don't have someone who's patient enough to do that, they're not going to be data driven, you know. And if you don't have it available and easily accessible for folks, they're not going to actually try and do that as well, right? So what we've kind of begun to do is we're creating fact tables of important fields, right? That can, like, fields that need to be across every single business system to kind of give people an idea, or give business practitioners an idea of the things that they need to know about a customer. For example, here I've got subscription information, I've got costs, I've got label fees, I've got currency, I've got whether they have trans protection on, all sorts of these fields. And this is like a subset of these fields, right? And push them across to Zendesk or Salesforce through a warehouse action in RudderStack, right? And utilizing these warehouse actions allows me to say, hi, guess what? When there's an update in this warehouse, you know, or when I trigger DBT to update these fields, right? I can then have that pushed using RudderStack to each of the business systems, right? So we've implemented this with Zendesk, which has worked pretty well. And we've implemented this with Intercom, which has worked pretty well. But there are also other solutions out there that do this similar sort of reverse ETL stuff, particularly for Salesforce. You've got Omnata, and you've also got the Salesforce data pipelines products that also exist for this use case, right? And I also know that within Zendesk, you've also got functionality within Zendesk where there's a plugin that will also do the same thing, right? So keeping these things within the systems where people actually do their work, to me, is like super important. And that's something that I'm trying to really have the internal systems team focus on throughout the next half, so that we can ensure that, you know, if people want to have a view of the customer that has all the important relevant features, we need to make sure that we meet them where they are. And this is part of the way of doing that. Cool. So a few lessons we've learned throughout this entire implementation process, right? So some things that I want to really stress are that I want people who are considering this or just moving on this to move towards a product mindset much sooner rather than later, right? And I'll go over what that means, but basically we're trying to move away from the aspect of, hey, I've got this ticket and I need to solve this, you know. We want to be able to say, hey, take a strategic approach to how we're doing things and ensure that downstream your products actually provide what is required to the user, right? We also want, when you're building your team, you also want to encourage curiosity, right? And hire for that, in my mind. You want to really encourage curiosity and really make sure that people are able to ask the questions that they need to ask, or like that they're actually really interested in these technologies, right? Not just looking for perfection there. And also, like, something that I found really important for us throughout this entire process was really keeping our relationships with other teams very strong and trying to bring folks along on the journey, right? Because you can only do so much as a one-person army, right? You can only do so much. You're eventually going to need the help of others with you, right? So if I look at this, why a product mindset? And I put this little picture of this ridiculous magpie for learner's plate because I think it's adorable, but also because it's something that I think it's hard to learn this, you know? So eventually, if you want to run a bit lean, if you want to make sure that you have, like, you know, you have enough resources to what it is you need to do, you have to eventually enable self-serve somehow, right? And the way that we try to enable self-serve is through a set of DB transforms and Looker, right? However, even with that self-serve ability, and I've got 81 people accessing it a month, which is amazing, it's really difficult to break that habit of saying yes to every little piece of ad hoc work, right? I think in general, a lot of people who work in data want to please, and are really, really kind people who want to please people, right? So something that I've had to learn how to do myself is break that habit of just saying yeah, and actually say, if I say yes to this weird little piece of ad hoc work, I'm actually saying no to the broader strategy at some points, right? And if I'm saying no to that broader strategy, I'm forever going to be pulling my team back into, hey, I need to do this X thing, or I need to do this Y little ad hoc thing, right? Because that strategic work is really necessary to deploy that self-serve capability for later, right? So something we've had to implement and kind of really get on board with, and it's harder for some people than it is for others, is to kind of get comfortable for release schedule, for changes to your instances, to changes to DBT, changes to Looker. We've done it for changes to Looker, and we're not quite there yet for changes to DBT, being completely honest, but we're going to get there, right? And in my book, you need to be able to get analysts, on board with this sooner rather than later, right? I think a lot of times, like data analysts in general aren't quite as used to this way of working. I think a lot of times because of that, they want to help out as much as they can, because I know I'm that kind of person. But I've had to learn how to say, hey, guess what? I really can't work on this right now. This prioritization is out of whack. I know you may need this CEO, but actually what's more important is if you can get this for all time, as opposed to me repeatedly dipping back and doing it for you, right? And this has been something that has been a challenge for me, but I think if we're able to adopt this quicker, your stuff will sing, right? Other thing, curiosity versus perfection, right? So something that I found really interesting here is that I found that in hiring people, or people in general, not just analysts, I think that there's a lot of folks out there who love fulfilling measures of productivity, right? And those measures might be things like, I closed a ticket, I did a commit, I pushed, I did something, I made 50 fields, I did this. I can count and I can quantify, and I'm a min-maxer. So when I play my games on the internet, I actually like min-max my stats or something, right? A lot of data people tend to be like that, but I think with the stack, we need to think about what our most important resource is, which is people, and which is actually our people and the mindsets that they have, right? So I think what's really important is to kind of cultivate like a curiosity for the user experience, right? Because if a user is not able to go ahead and say, yo, guess what? This is the way that I use the system. Come here, let me show you, right? And if the person, if like we as a team aren't engaged in that experience, we're going to be building a lot of product for them that isn't exactly what they need, right? Or you're going to be building up metrics that may not actually be useful, right? And so for me, it's about trying to like really understand what people are doing and what people have to do in order to get their jobs done, and how you can make it easier for them, right? It always comes back to me like, are you curious about the business process? Are you curious about what people are doing? Are you curious about why people hate X aspect of their job? Because if they hate X aspect, can you automate it so that they can not hate X anymore and maybe spend time on other stuff, right? It's about how, like, being curious about that next improvement, right? And that's kind of what I would always be looking for. Because if you're curious about that and you want to do that, you'll make sure that you'll make sure that you make the improvements that we need, right? So here's like a little picture of a dashboard that with all sorts of stats that I wouldn't even think of, like carrier dispersion, transit times structured like that, parcels with various different things. Like I've intentionally obfuscated some of the metrics. Like it goes on for a while, but I didn't make that dashboard myself, right? It would have taken me a long time to do this, I admit, because like, especially in something like shipping or logistics, there's a lot of people who love domain knowledge, right? And in my mind, something that I had to do with these quote unquote thin slicing, as much as I think that phrase is a little funny, because when I think of thin slices, I think of like ice skating for some reason. When you think of thin slices, right, you want to be able to show people these thin slices so that they're like, hey, that's really cool. Now that you've shown me you can kind of do this, here's what my thoughts are for this next metric. Here's what my thoughts are for what people would really like to see when they look at a dashboard. Here's what we can do with real-time alerting. Here's what we want people to get alerted for when their parcel's on time or when X or Y doesn't work, right? So I would say use those domain experts and use them as advocates, right? And bring them along on the journey because they're really interested in actually doing the work better, right? The reason why, like, if you find passionate people around who like may not be super skilled at data or analytics, bring them along on the journey and show them exactly what you're doing because they'll surprise you. You know what I mean? I fell into the trap of thinking that my Looker instance had to be like absolutely perfect for like about a month before I let it fly, right? And when I fell into that trap and I was just like, wait, that's, I didn't get what I was expecting out of it because I didn't realize what people were actually looking for, And so when I started showing people and opening up a lot and saying like, hey, I can do this now, or hey, I can calculate it. I can calculate this now. We can exclude weekends and holidays, or we can get an accurate measure of X, Y, and Z. And you can start to show people the different metrics and things that are possible. People will start to build on top of that, right? And so I always come back to empathy with this, right? Because if we're bringing people into, some people who are domain experts, they're obviously very smart, right? But you bring people into uncharted territory, right? Have empathy for how you're explaining it to them because you're probably going to have to explain yourself a gajillion times because I've probably explained the modern data stack to each person at Shippit at least 4 times. And involve them, show people what you've done, be really proud and like almost kind of like, I think that sometimes we don't take enough credit for ourselves, take up that space, show people the stuff that you've done so that you can get their input and just keep iterating and improving on it, right? And finally, also remember, this is hard for me to say because I am a loud human being, but the loudest person is not always your most important customer, right? If you find people, find people across the business who you're able to partner with who are experts in the domain as you start to roll out your products and get those people on your side. Find those influencers and keep your relationship strong as you begin to build out your systems, right? So if I am talking about next steps for what we're doing here at Shippit, we're really going on a data commercialization journey very soon, right? We want to share the best of what we can do with our external customers. And we also want to build out a GIS capability, right? Because like I come from the world of aviation, so that's a lot of origin, destination based stuff in general, and also like, wayfinding, et cetera, et cetera. Like anything to me that's based on pickups, drop-offs, origins, destinations, building our way into the world of GIS is going to be super important. Snowflake's going to be part of that journey, right? And also we're hiring a whole bunch of folk right now. There's going to be an analytics engineer position open. There's a data engineer position open. And there's a system integration specialist position that should be opening quite soon to help staff up our teams. And this isn't the end of it. There's so many folks. So let us know if you're interested. We'd love to have a chat with you. There's my contact details. Feel free to email me and have a chat. I'm a slippery little fish. I can be kind of hard to pin down. As Serena probably well knows. And also my LinkedIn, I snagged Nitt, which, pretty neat because who snagged their first name on LinkedIn? I mean, my first name isn't that common, but, awesome. So thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful.
Thanks so much, Nitt. It was a really insightful presentation that you went through and great to hear the journey that we've kind of been working with you side by side. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I guess, you've talked a lot about putting the data in the hands of the business and giving that self-service analytics. What has been the biggest business benefit that Shippit has seen from adopting Snowflake?
Right. So one of the biggest benefits that I think we've seen is account management in general has been really, really able to embrace Snowflake and the modern data stack and Looker and really build their own reports that are customized to the needs of the account management team, right? So that basically means, hey, look, guess what? I've got big important customer here. Why did their transit times go up by a day? Oh, let's see. Oh, well, maybe there's an issue with pickups for this particular merchant in this particular region. Let's see if we can switch allocations from toll to say Allied Express because toll's having issues in that region right now, right? So they're able to capture these issues pretty quickly, right? And spend time and actually reduce the amount of standard cadence catch-ups they have and just make them, hey, guess what? there's an issue here. I was able to fix your allocation and just ping them on through another form of communication rather than having meetings, right? Or rather than having like hour-long meetings every day. Because I know there's a time period where we're having hour-long meetings every day for some of our important customers that have been scaled back to like once a week or even once every 2 weeks now because of the data of the insights that they've been able to capture from Snowflake. And to me, like that's a team that's very time poor, right? So being able to give back like over 4 hours a day to them, that's like, that's like getting back almost like 2 camp managers back to you. You know what I mean? And that to me proves the benefits of really having the data in a format that people can actually access, play around with.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of your customers, do you provide Snowflake powered Looker dashboards to your customers directly?
So we're on the journey of doing that right now, right? So one of our big focuses is going to be allowing this to occur. Right now, what we do is that we actually have account managers walk through the dashboards with them during calls and show them various insights and things that they've pulled out, right? We want to be able to move towards allowing the self-service stability, right? And that's something that's on our roadmap for pretty soon after the new fiscal year.
Great, very exciting. I know things are moving quite fast at Shippit. In terms of to the audience, I know we've got 1 or 2 questions here. Please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat for Nitt. I guess another question that we have is, what challenges did you face when it came to, you mentioned you moved from like a Redshift background to Snowflake, and how did you overcome them?
So some of the challenges that we faced were essentially like a lot of folk who have used Redshift before, right? Because we had a lot of people who had been like, okay, well, in my previous company, we used Redshift. Why would we try Snowflake? Why would we try something new? Already know this actually works. Why would I change, right? That was a lot of the argument I was getting, right? And the other argument that I got too was part of my reasoning for wanting to use Snowflake was after I did all of the research on the benefits, I was like, hey, this will save me so much time, right? I had to actually prove those things out as well, because they're like, hey, Nitt, you came from Redshift background also. Why would you dump that and choose something else that's new, right? And so a lot of that was just really bring people along on the journey, as I keep saying, because this is like the theme for this was basically our journey together, right? It was to say, hey, there's a bunch of features within Snowflake that will actually help me do the maintenance and prevent me from requiring the additional load of another data engineer at the very beginning of our process, right? Things like, it's funny how often the phrase vacuum scripts seems to scare people. It really does. That's one thing, right? Being able to, talking about scaling up and down and also horizontally is also something that really speaks to a lot of folks, because at the beginning of this process, I was actually able to, we didn't actually spend too much on Snowflake at the very beginning, right? As usage goes up, of course, you're going to use more. But if you're able to say, hey, at the beginning, I spend like $600 a month on credits and I'm running a space off of that, versus, hi, I spent $32,000 or $36,000 US on a Redshift managed, right? That adds up a lot, So I kind of looked at it from the perspective of bring people along on the new features, proving it out using a thin sliced use case, and also then saying, hey, guess what? I can have some serious cost savings for the beginning of for the beginning of this project, because that beginning of the project time period when you're not spending too much is actually really helpful to say, hey, guess what? We're really proving this out, make sure this works. Yeah. There's also the issue of I think the biggest issue was people figuring out how to write dates in Snowflake. I'm not sure why that's such a big thing. It is though. It's a huge random thing where people come to me and get very frustrated because their dates aren't working right. I had to make little cheat sheets for people, and it's fine. It's completely okay. I may even share the cheat sheet with you guys if you ask. So feel free to ask me for those weird little cheat sheets, but we're all okay now. We're all fine now. So those 4 things.
Yeah, definitely share the sheet sheets with us, because I know that sometimes the date formatting, I'm pretty sure we're making updates to it, but we'd love to be able to share what you've done to overcome that hurdle. Cool. And in terms of, I guess, you've kind of addressed some of the challenges you faced when you came from your traditional data warehousing background. What would you say the three main benefits of Snowflake compared to your previous background?
So for me, really, the maintenance is a lot easier, right? So I don't have to write scheduling scripts to ensure that I scale up and down at the proper times. I don't have to vacuum. I don't have to do a lot of the other things that I used to have to do, right? I also find it much more performant, right? There are certain queries in the older system, in other systems, where things would time out magically. In Snowflake, if I didn't write the query properly, if someone didn't write the query properly, there's always the option to brute force it through, right? Or actually, I usually find things actually run quite performantly. I think someone was saying that a query that used to take them, 15 minutes on an older Redshift cluster took them 8 seconds in Snowflake. I also don't know why people were writing a query that took 15 minutes, but hey, that everyone thinks they can write SQL, right? And also one more benefit that I found is just where it's not something that I've used way too much of yet, but we're starting to look into it more often, right? Is the external data tables and being able to bring those in and use them as sources, right? I haven't used those quite as much right now, but this is something that we're really looking into. And I think that, for our use cases in the future, right, being able to access things like, weather, being able to access things like exchange rates, being able to access things like, densities, stuff like that is going to be super helpful, and it is actually something that I looked at the very beginning of this process. I also really like the data sharing abilities that Snowflake had. There's a bonus. Yeah, and that's also something that we're looking to in the future, the ability to create data shares to really share with other customers who use Snowflake their own data back to them. That's something that after we figure out the ways of working that we want to utilize for that, I think that's a really powerful product.
Yeah, it's definitely something you and I have spoken about, and we're really excited about where Shippit is going from a data sharing and definitely data marketplace perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to current state and your journey with Snowflake from the beginning, the integration with Looker, how did you find the integration when it came to Snowflake being able to connect to third-party tools like Looker or like Zendesk? How did you find that experience?
I'm pretty good, actually. I can't complain, really. It works pretty seamlessly with Looker. With Zendesk, there's a plugin that you can automate, and if you want to go ahead and say, "Hey, I want X field within Zenny," you're able to do that really easily. Snow to Zenny through a plugin. Similar with Snowflake to Salesforce, right? Really easy to do. I've actually found using Rudderstack and Rudderstack's warehouse actions are able to do all of those, right? But if you want to be able to maintain it within each internal system team, for example, if I wanted the revenue operations team to really manage the way that data was coming in and being utilized within Salesforce without having to ask me, I could either A, train them up on RUDs, or B, just throw them on Nata or Salesforce data pipelines, whichever solution they felt was more necessary. So there's a lot of the flexibility that you have with the way that you structure solutions is quite good, and that allows you to be able to really get data into the hands of people and make sure that it's being utilized in the right way.
Absolutely. Well, that's really all we've got for questions. We like now, and thank you so much, Nitt, for answering those questions. It's been super insightful and great to hear about your journey. We might pass over now to Alex Lee from Snowflake, who's going to use the last 15 minutes to take us through some Snowflake product updates from our recent summit. So Nitt, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
No worries, anytime.
Thank you so much, Nitt. That was fantastic hearing your story and how you're actually building out the platform with Snowflake as well. So that's really appreciated, and I'm sure the people that on this call also found it valuable. So yes, so Serena mentioned that we've just gone through our summit. Some of the new features that's been announced inside of Summit, and I would like to share some of that. I don't think I'll be able to share everything in 15 minutes. It was actually a summit that spanned over 2 days. So a lot of those announcements and things like that would have been distilled here in this presentation. Definitely, if you do want to know more about Snowflake and how individual features work, more than happy to actually communicate with you privately as well. So with that, I'm just going to bring you through some of the key features that we've announced. First and foremost, obviously, this is a safe harbor statement to do with purchasing decisions. Obviously, you would purchase based on the existing shipping of product. Any timelines mentioned in this presentation can move and change over time. So really, yes, definitely talking about the summit and what's actually happened through those 2 days. And so we're just going to go through that now. And it's really actually divided into about 5 different categories. And we've listed that out here. A part of it's to do with connected industry. How do we actually help those customers in terms of global governance? How do we actually secure our platform? A lot of features announced are to do with platform optimization. So how do we actually improve performance over the time of Snowflake? It is a fast platform already, but we actually continually improving it over time and undercover. Data programmability, so being able to actually cater for our data applications workload. And now we've also got Powered by Snowflake, a partner initiative that we've just started. So let's talk about connected industries. So this particular theme is more about how do we actually monetize data? How do we actually share that data across our network of platform? And it's to Nitt's point as well. So being able to actually expose your data in the data marketplace, but actually further expanding that with our capability on the data marketplace. So what we've announced is the try before you buy model. So existing customers today normally negotiate a contract outside of Snowflake for anything to do with monetary value. We're now putting in place in the network towards the end of this year on a try before you buy. So you can actually try out sample data sets and actually purchase those data sets within Snowflake. And you can see on the right-hand side, we've actually built in to the model a number of different ways that you can actually consume the data sets. So whether it's by usage, by a fixed amount, or by a mixture of both, so a bit of a hybrid. And more of that in terms of what the capabilities are, we can definitely sign you up to our private preview, and that's on the link at the bottom here. The other thing that we've announced is a tighter Servicenow integration. So being able to actually have a connector between Snowflake and Servicenow, being able to actually perform those incremental updates a lot easier as well. So as you know, there are a number of connectors that's available with Snowflake. We've announced the Servicenow connector that's actually due for private preview towards Q3 of this year. So next theme we've got is to do with the global governance piece. And it's about the 3 different sides of security. Really, it's about knowing your data. How do we actually classify your information? It's about then, once you know what that data is, being able to protect that information. And thirdly, once you've got the right security model in place, how do you actually unlock that information so that the people with the right access can actually access that over time? So those 3 pillars is broken up into, I guess, the 3 pillars, and then those types of technologies that actually are I guess created in terms of actually improvements are listed here. So on the left-hand side, we've got the classification as well as the object tagging improvements that we've actually included into Snowflake. In the data protection space, we've got the anonymization as well as row-level policies, dynamic data masking, tokenization and conditional masking. And then lastly, in terms of actually looking at the access, we've got the access history. And I'm just going to run through each one in subsequent slides. So a little bit about knowing your data. We've got now automatic data classification. At this point in time, it's really used US data only. But at ingest level, what can happen with Snowflake is we automatically use the tagging capability to actually tag information. So an ideal use case for this is something to do with PII information, whether the name, address, gender, and we classify them to either actual PII information or pseudo PII information, and then that can be used to further restrict access to that type of information inside of the different tables and views that you can expose within Snowflake. The next thing we got here is obviously being able to actually choose the different responsibility. Then you can actually adjust the data view requirement accordingly. Protecting your data. So this is based on the object tagging capability. Your administrator can then apply policies so that different people see different views. So you can see in this example on the right-hand side, we've got a customer table with PII type information, a data analyst with different types of access or restricted access would then see only partial information for the different columns. So anonymization is more to do with the column level. Object tagging obviously is important in terms of actually understanding the different data and the metadata across it. So being able to actually tag those information correctly so that you can start, once you've got the the tagging capability, then you can actually start grouping and filtering as you need to. So those three kind of work together. And the next part is to do with the role access policy. So this is quite similar to virtual private databases in different database technologies. But essentially what you have is a role-based method of actually filtering the row records that you've got inside of different tables. So then rather than building out different tables, you now have the ability to actually have one centralized table to actually, but with the right access control so that you can only see certain information within those tables. Dynamic data masking, that's been in GA for quite some time now. It's the dynamic masking, well, as the name suggests, dynamic masking of information as a person actually accesses that data. So in these particular examples, you might have social security numbers or phone numbers. We can actually mask them at the time of actually reading the information from the database. Conditional masking. So this is actually quite useful. If you actually have fields that you can, for a particular field, you can actually, based on the type of field information on a particular row, you can actually mask the information. So you can see in this particular sample here, you might base it on different departments. So a sales department may only see a certain amount of information, whereas a person who's accessing it from a finance department or role are able to actually see the full phone number information. External tokenization. So this is based off obviously customer requirements. A number of our customers are now using external tokenization engines. So you can actually make a call outside using external functions from Snowflake and actually get the tokenized and de-tokenize the data that's actually within Snowflake using an external provider. Access history. So we mentioned that a little bit earlier. It's to do with looking at the different audit of tables and views, be able to actually look at how a table is accessed over time. And also, I guess if you think about the flip side of it, whether or not table is actually used. A use case may be that if you've got tables within Snowflake that you're not using over time, you might be able to remove that or reduce them or delete the tables if you're no longer using it or no longer finding it useful. And last announcement at the summit was to do with the integration with Alation. So Alation can be used to actually apply policies within Snowflake. This is quite early stage for us. It's good to see that there are additional partners within the Snowflake ecosystems to actually create the governance and security that we need. Next is to do with the platform optimization. So these are actually all undercovers. So what we've done over time is actually done a lot of improvements in terms of compilation, the scheduling of the memory queries, as well as actually looking at faster startups of queries themselves. These are really to do with being able to look after the high or low latency, high concurrency data models that a lot of our customers are actually looking at creating. So a data application type use case where they're actually building applications on top of Snowflake. So in order to cater for that and in order to improve on the performance, a lot of things are happening behind the scenes to allow that to happen. Other things in terms of improvements is we've actually created a new encryption algorithm that actually does a lot of a 30% improvement in terms of compression. Existing data inside of Snowflake would stay at the old compression, but I guess if you think about it, if we actually did a create table and refresh that data, you would be taking advantage of the new storage algorithm. We've also made some improvements in terms of the ingestion. So there's been a 35% improvement in performance on ingestion through Snowpipe as well. And all this is actually happening behind the scenes with the point Nitt made about, not having to actually think about a lot of these administration tasks. These things actually just happen out of the box and there's no actual additional maintenance required on them. One other thing that we mentioned in the summit is to do with query acceleration. There's over time in Snowflake, there's always been the multi-clustered nodes, as Nitt mentioned, to do with being able to actually spread the node across multiple clusters. And that helps with having concurrent processes running small to medium-sized queries. There's been a reluctance, I guess, to create the vertical increase in compute because it does mean additional cluster sizes as well as compute power and CPU. So what at Snowflake we've developed is something called query acceleration. And what it does is it actually divides the actual workload into different, different tasks. And where applicable, it would actually increase the compute cluster requirements for those warehouses temporarily. So what you see here in front of you on screen is actually the internal Snowflake instance. We actually turned it on within Snowflake, and that's actually provided a improvement in performance of certain queries depending on the actual workload. So you automatically behind the scenes increase the size of the warehouse to actually provide the extra compute capacity that's needed. So being able to actually do more with your existing warehouse sizes as well. And that's actually done via, I guess you set that up inside warehouse level. So it's actually almost like a checkbox within the warehouse. You actually enable that via a flag. And then what it does is it automatically behind the scenes works out what's required. I'm just checking on time. I think it's actually about 3:30 now. So Rena, is that all we've got time for?
Yes. I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Alex.
Okay, no worries.
And once again, we'd like to thank you all for joining. Thank you, Nitt, for sharing your journey with Snowflake today. We hope everyone enjoyed and learnt a few things as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.